Good afternoon, namaskar. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, Professor Dr. Ritika Khera, Mr. Dinesh Thakur, Mr. Debashish Basu, Suchita Dalal, other ladies and gentlemen present here. I think it my duty to pay my homage to late Shamnath, whom I knew do not very well, but I had occasions to interact with him. And as Ms. Dalal said, a personality who could make friends without much time. I pay my homage to him. Before I start reading my prepared lecture, I would like to just add something more to what Mr. Basu said here. I sincerely think I'm a destiny's child. It's because Mr. Ramakrishna Hegde, no relative of mine, not from my community, was also a detainee in jail when I was representing them in everyday affairs during emergency. When he became the Chief Minister, made me the Advocate General of the state of Karnataka, not because I was the best available person, probably because of the services rendered at a very difficult point of time. Similarly, during the process, I had met Mr. Soli Sorabji during emergency, whom I had requested to come and argue the case. He had taken some sort of a liking for me, and when he became the Attorney General under Mr. V.P. Singh's regime, he made me the additional Solicitor General of India. Then, as was mentioned, Mr. Vajpayee was also a detainee. When he became the Prime Minister, made me the Solicitor General of India. Then by mistake, people in power in Karnataka invited me to become the Lokayukta Karnataka. All this leads to only one conclusion, that it is not necessary to be a very intelligent person to hold the office, but if you discharge the duties of that office honestly, without fear or favor, you always get another chance. And this is what I keep telling the youth of the country. While it is absolutely necessary to be content with what you legitimately earn, you must also have an ambition to grow, ambition to become somebody big, ambition even to become rich. Legitimately earned wealth is no product of sin. But if you take it from somebody's pocket or from somebody's stomach, that's when it becomes a sin, not only a crime. It's in this background, ladies and gentlemen, I had multiple opportunity of serving different authorities, and best of them was when I became the Karnataka Lokayukta. My earlier assignments gave me a lot of insight to the law, but not the realities of life, which I saw for the first time as Karnataka Lokayukta. That institution had only two jurisdictions. One is fighting corruption through Lokayukta police, because under the Prevention of Corruption Act, there is a section which obligates that any investigation under that act can be conducted only by a police officer, not below the rank of a deputy superintendent of police, and not by anybody else. And Lokayukta is not a police officer. So whatever anti-corruption work that was done by the Karnataka Lokayukta, which included sending charge sheets against 3 chief ministers of Karnataka, and one of them was a sitting chief minister, went to jail. Of course, he got an acquittal from the court, and happens to be the present Chief Minister also. So I have a serious complaint against the society in which we live. Because I think we live today in a society which respects only money and power, nothing else. We talk about honest people, generally defined as useless people. They don't take money, they don't allow others to take money also. This is the definition of honesty. And I found so much of greed prevailing in the society, and I was wondering, why is this happening? Then I realized, if society condones all the evils in then people would love to do it and follow the wrong path, and that's exactly what's happening in the society today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm prefacing my lecture, which is titled as Good Governance, is it a right of a citizen in democracy? And this topic is chosen by me because of my experience in the Karnataka Lokayukta. In the process of learning in the Lokayukta institution, I saw so much of sufferings of the people. Poor people, rich people don't require any ombudsman's post and all, it's only the poor people who require. And sufferings because of the actions and inactions on the part of the governance. So much so, I would like to bring it to your notice the growth of greed in this country. You all might have, seniors present here, might have heard about a scam called Jeep scam in the decade of 50s, when the country lost 51 lakhs of rupees in purchasing Jeep vehicles for our Indian soldiers. Thereafter, most of you might have heard about Mundra scam of LIC, Dalmia scam of Bharat Bank, Nagarwala scam of Central Bank, and such like scams. Coming to the decade of 80s, many of you would have heard about Bofus. Country lost 64 crores of rupees in purchasing Bofus guns for our soldiers. 2007, I'm skipping many of the scams and all for want of time. Country saw two scams, the Commonwealth Games. Country lost 70,000 crores. This figure is not mine. This figure is reported to the Government of India by a constitutional authority called CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. He said, few people in power, it could be political power or executive power, siphoned off 70,000 crores from the treasury. Same year, 2G scam, country lost 1,76,000 crores. 2012 Colgate, coal scam, country lost 1,86,000 crores. If you lose so much of money in scams, how much money is really available for administration or development? The answer to this question is given by a former Prime Minister of this country, late Rajiv Gandhi, way back in 1985, when he publicly said, out of 1 rupee government spends, only 15 paise reaches the targeted project or the beneficiary. In 1985, today we are in 2019, greed has not come down, it has only gone up. From out of 10 rupees will 15 paise reach the project? I doubt very much. We talking about the budget of state of Karnataka for 2017-18, what was reserved for 1 year for 6.5 crores of people, out of which 4 lakh government servants, is only 1,80,000 crores. And if only 15 paise reaches the target, how much development can be there is something for you all to guess. And we talk about development. What development we are talking? It's in this background, ladies and gentlemen, I have chosen the topic, is good governance right of a citizen in Action Aid, an organization espousing the cause of good governance, in its resource book titled Good Governance, published in 2004, traces the international thinking in the issue of governance. It states, I quote, "The issue of governance and the state came into sharp focus in the aftermath of World War II. While democracy was touted as the greatest good for the greatest number, it was often reduced to the will of majority. Carried to the extreme, this majoritarian will led to cruel repression of minorities, as was witnessed in the Nazi Germany prior to the genocide. Horrified at the depth to which the rule of law of the majority could sink if it is not based on democratic values of equity and justice, the United Nations came out with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This set forth in detail the minimum obligations of the state to all persons at all times. Neither the will of majority nor the greatest good for the greatest number could override these principles," unquote. In the above background, the above resource book describes governance as a combination of three components, that of process, content, and deliverables. The process of governance includes factors such as transparency and accountability. Content includes values such as justice and equity. Governance cannot be all process and values. It must ensure that the citizens, especially the poorest, have the basic needs and have a life with dignity. A dictatorship that delivers basic needs to the citizen is no doubt a better dictatorship, better than a dictatorship that does not. But it is not good governance. Similarly, regular elections alone do not translate into good governance. Rule of law that is transparent but not unjust is certainly not good governance. It is only when all these three conditions are fulfilled that governance becomes good governance. Good governance implies an administration that is sensitive and responsive to the needs of the people and is effective in coping with emerging challenges in society by framing and implementing appropriate laws and measures. It includes strict rules of accountability. It could be centered on community groups or individuals and based on a notion of rights as inherently comprising duties. Rulers must be strictly bound by generally accepted norms and controlled by institutions to enforce those. India fought for its independence not only from foreign domination and to regain its sovereignty, but also to be governed by itself. It wanted a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Under the Indian Constitution, people who administer the country have special status. They have been recognized as the executive. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary form three main pillars of the Constitution. The Constitution of India envisages an independent executive. Its connection with the legislature is only through the cabinet. The duties and powers to be exercised by the executive are governed by the transaction of business rules made under Article 77 and 166 of the Constitution. The executive can be broadly divided as political executive, that is, the cabinet, and the bureaucrats who should actually administer the country at various levels in their hierarchy. To give good governance or administration, the Constitution provides for separate administrative services both at the center and at the state levels. The members of the bureaucracy are selected with prescribed educational qualifications and through competitive examination. Thereafter, they are trained in the art of public administration. While the political executive, which is the cabinet, is selected from the elected representatives, for them no educational qualification or experience is prescribed. They come to the legislature through elections, and on being appointed to the cabinet as minister, become political executive. Obviously, this type of dual executive system is adopted by the Indian Constitution with the view to give the executive a people-friendly look. In their own areas, political executive and bureaucrats have to work independently. But political executive, by their presumed popularity, has acquired excessive dominance by misusing the transaction of business rules. If these rules were to be used only for the object for which they were incorporated in the Constitution, then the bureaucrats would have been the true administrators and would have been instrumental in providing good governance, which is, in my opinion, equal to any fundamental rights of the citizens of India in the given to them in the Constitution. The idea that constitutional framers did not intend Articles 77 and 166 to be used for political dominance in governance is clear from the fact that no qualification was fixed for members of the legislature and the cabinet. Over the years, political dominance in the guise of representing people's will has overshadowed the importance of bureaucracy. This dominance is not resisted by many in the bureaucracy. On the contrary, many willingly or meekly submitted to this dominance, because of which good governance has suffered. Lack of good governance was perceived by the country as far back as in 1960 itself. Therefore, an Administrative Reforms Commission was constituted, which in its report submitted in 1966, among other recommendations, also recommended the creation of an Indian type of ombudsman called the Lokpal at the center and the Lokayuks at the state level. Karnataka legislature passed the Karnataka Lokayukta Act in 1984 and brought it into force in 1986. Though not all, some of the states have followed this step. Need for the existence of this institution is reiterated by the Second Administrative Reforms Commission in its report made in the year 2007, which officially indicates that maladministration still continues. Good governance can be provided by public servants only if they realize that they are not masters of the people, but they are only servants of the people, and they owe a duty to the people. For this, they will have to follow certain principles of Raj Dharma. The ingredients of Raj Dharma is enumerated in a report prepared by Lord Nolan of United Kingdom, which is known as Standards in Public Life. This report, though prepared with reference to governance in Great Britain, the same is ipso facto applicable to the governance in India. Lord Nolan's 7 principles of public life, and they are: 1. Selflessness, that is, holder of public office should take decisions solely in terms of public interest. They should not do so in order to gain financial or other material benefits for themselves, their families, or their friends. The second is integrity, that is, holder of public office should not place themselves under any financial or other obligation to outside individuals or organizations that might influence them in the performance of their official duties. Third one, objectivity, that is, in carrying out public business, including making public appointments, awarding contracts, or recommending individuals for rewards and benefits, holder of public office should make choice on merit. Next one is accountability, that is, holder of public office are accountable for their decisions and actions to the public and must submit themselves to whatever scrutiny is appropriate to their office. Next one is openness, that is, holder of public office should be as open as possible about all the decisions and actions they take. They should give reasons for their decisions and restrict information only when the wider public interest clearly demands. Next, honesty, that is, holder of public office have a duty to declare any private interest relating to their public duties and to take steps to resolve any conflict arising in a way that protects the public interest. Next is the last one, is the leadership. That is, holder of public office should promote and support these principles by leadership and example. Unquote. The above principles were accepted by the Honorable Supreme Court of India in its judgment in the case of Vineet Narayan versus Union of India, AIR 1988, Supreme Court 889. While accepting the above principles, the Supreme Court stated thus, and I quote, "These principles of public life are of general application in every democracy, and one is expected to bear them in mind while scrutinizing conduct of every holder of public office. It is trite that the holder of public office are entrusted with certain powers to be exercised in public interest alone, and therefore the office is held by them in trust for the people. Any deviation from the path of rectitude by any of them amounts to breach of trust and must be severely dealt with instead of being pushed under the carpet. If conduct amounts to an offence, it must be promptly investigated, and the offender against whom a prima facie case is made out should be prosecuted expeditiously so that the majesty of law is upheld and the rule of law is vindicated. The adverse impact of lack of probity in public life leading to a high degree of corruption is manifold. It also has adverse effect on foreign investment and funding from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, who have warned that future aid to underdeveloped countries may be subject to the requisite steps being taken to eradicate corruption, which prevents international aid from reaching those for whom it is meant." Unquote. In another case of State of Assam versus P.C. Mishra, AIR 1966, Supreme Court, page 430, the court stated thus, and I quote, "It is incumbent for each occupant of every high office to be constantly aware that the power invested in the high office he holds is meant to be exercised in public interest and only for public good, and that is not meant to be used for personal benefit or merely to elevate the personal status of current holder of that office. Constant awareness of the nature of this power and the purpose for which it is meant would prevent situations leading to clash of egos and resultant fallout detrimental to public interest." Unquote. There is no doubt under the Indian Constitution, the executive, both political and bureaucratic, are very powerful organs. Still, they should always bear in mind their obligation to the people, as also to the prophetic words, "Be you ever so high, the law is above you." Having analyzed these guidelines for the administration of good governance, let me consider whether the above principles laid down by Lord Nolan are still followed by the administration in the present day context. The public perception is that there is lack of ethics in governance both at the center and at the states. Reason may be many, and this lack is felt not only by common man, but also by people holding very high offices. For example, none other than the Honorable Prime Minister of this country, the Prime Minister of this country, who on 15th of April 2007, addressing the 2006 batch of IAS probationers, stated, it's reported in Deccan Herald dated 16th of May 2007, and I quote, "Barriers of administrative and political corruption should be tackled by upcoming bureaucrats and quality of governance be improved at all levels to build an India worthy of our dreams. If there are barriers in our country, in our good governance, in our governance process. It is a fact that there is a lot of corruption both at the political level and the administrative level. We must take it head on." Unquote. Thereafter, the very same Prime Minister, while inaugurating the conference of CBI, stated that there is very large scale of corruption, even in high places. Many big fish are escaping and they should be caught and severely punished at the earliest. Obviously, the said Honorable Prime Minister was talking about corruption in governance. These words of the Honorable Prime Minister are certainly not complimentary, and he was certainly speaking with all responsibilities. His words indicate that apart from lack of good governance, there is corruption in administration. When one speaks of corruption and maladministration, it is not a question of a degree or percentage of corruption in administration, but it is about the lack of probity, which is the foundation of good governance. Even the governor of Karnataka, Sri T.N. Chaturvedi, who was a bureaucrat himself, in his last Republic Day address said, and I quote, "Corruption is not merely a dirty word, it describes a dirty act. We need to have policy of zero tolerance towards all acts of corruption. We need to assert that there is no difference between a small act of corruption and a major instance of malfeasance. There is no such thing as petty corruption, there is corruption per se. It is necessary to strike at the very root of corruption, for if we allow its tentacles to grow, we will be firmly in its grip with no way out. This is a very real danger. Corruption in any walk of life can corrode, decay, annihilate our democratic system. We can ignore or minimize its evil effects at our own risk. Corruption and unrefuted allegations of misuse of power for self and pelf do shake the faith of ordinary citizens in our democratic system." Unquote. Views expressed by the Honorable Prime Minister of the country and the Chief Executive of a state are truly reflecting the perception of the common man also. Having understood that there is corruption in administration, both political and bureaucratic, let me recapitulate at least one instance of corruption which must have affected directly the economy of the country and indirectly the rights of an ordinary man. It is reported in news item in Times of India that it is seen out of very many lakhs of crores released by the Government of India for 8 national schemes. It is reported by none other than the CAG that at least a sum of rupees 51,000 crores allocated to these schemes have not been accounted for. There are hundreds of such schemes of both central and state. Then how much money earmarked for the poor must have been siphoned off? It is a matter of public knowledge that in the year 1986, the Prime Minister reported to have stated that out of every rupee earmarked for the benefit of the citizen, only 15 paise reaches the beneficiary. Recently, another top leader of a national party has reportedly stated that the amount so spent has come down to 10% only. This almost means that it is only 10% of the amount sanctioned reaches the development or the poor. If this inference is justly drawn, it shows country spends only 10% of its expenditure on the ordinary citizen. If so, where does the balance 90% go? To put it conversely, that if 90% of the budget amount reaches the ordinary per man, guess what would be the benefit poor will get? If we apply this factual statement made by the Prime Minister of India, at least to the amount allocated for the benefit of the ordinary citizens in the annual budget of the central or state government, then you will notice the magnitude of corruption. It is said that towards the revenue expenditure, the annual budget provides for 8,97,232 crores of rupees for the benefit of ordinary citizens in this country. If out of this, as per late Prime Minister's calculation, only 15 paise reaches the beneficiary and 85% of the amount goes unaccounted, guess the quality of administration. This single factor will show the effect of corruption in good governance. It's because of this type of governance, even after 72 years of independence and 69 years of democracy, the poor have remained poor and the rich have become richer. When democracy defines governance is one of the when democracy defines governance as one of the one has to see the effect of corruption in governance. One has to go to public offices and try to seek an interview with the public servant and experience whether it is possible to get even an interview with such public servant at any hierarchy without pocketful of money to bribe or pocket political backing to get the work done. If one makes an audit of the time spent by bureaucrats of every level of their work, I am sure that the said report will show that most of the time bureaucrats are not in their designated places but are in so-called meetings with the political bosses. India, which boasts of the largest democracy in the world, which is supposed to be ruled by government of the people, by the people, seems to have lost the true meaning of the word democracy. Let me try to find out briefly the cause of this malice. Our Constitution contemplated an independent legislature, an executive, and a judiciary. Over the years, for reasons well known, the legislature and the bureaucrats seems to have merged into one group like the conjoined twins, one supported by the other. If our constitutional organs like the executive is independent and honest, there could be no political corruption and vice versa. If there is corruption as stated by the Honorable Prime Minister, and I believe it to be true, then it is because of the collective greed of the elected representatives and the bureaucracy. Has the government made any efforts whatsoever to fight corruption is the moot question. Originally, when Indian Penal Code was drafted, it contained a provision against almost all crimes that was perceived by the society, which includes corruption. When a particular crime grows out of proportion, the legislature makes a special law to fight the same, like Anti-Terrorist Act, offences against women, etc. In 1947 itself, the government of the time perceived that corruption had reached a stage which required a special law other than the Penal Code to deal with it. Hence, the Prevention of Corruption Act of 1947 was codified. With the tremendous growth in corruption and number of people involved in corruption, one would have expected the lawmakers to make strict anti-corruption laws. Alas, that did not happen. But what happened on 23rd of December 2008 is something unbelievable. While approving 17 laws in 12 minutes, the lower house of the Indian Parliament also approved the amendments to Prevention of Corruption Act, which literally nullified the powers of the prosecuting agency. Thank God these bills did not become law because it did not go to the Raj Sabha. I ask a question to the lawmakers. Since 1947 to December 2008, has corruption reduced? So it became necessary for them to make a law to dilute the effect of Prevention of Corruption Act. One of the commonest methods by which the bureaucrat could be made subservient or even corrupt is by way of transfer. Today, the government servants are used to cushy postings, which is one of the gifts of the political bosses. Transferring officials is not and should not be a prerogative of political bosses. It is the most potent weapon by which you can control the honest bureaucrats and reward the dishonest one. I strongly believe that the power of transfer should be vested with bureaucracy itself, and the politicians should not have a role to play in it. Way back in 2007 itself, I had written a letter to the Second Administrative Reforms Commission about the evils of transfer in the hands of political bosses. But nothing seems to have happened except reproducing my letter in one of its reports. Transparency and accountability are the other factors which makes or mars good governance. Unfortunately, both are lacking in spite of Right to Information Act coming into force. Good governance requires foresight and master planning. Administration should be able to foresee natural calamities and provide measures in advance to face the calamities. But today, as is well known, any calamity is a boon to a large section of governance. Cynics say in democracy people get the government they deserve. I do not believe it. Maybe in life many events happen over which we may not have any control. But in a democracy, many changes can be achieved if people fight for it collectively. According to me, good governance is our fundamental right. Collective voice for this will have its own effect. Everyone should raise their voice about it. If that happens one day in future, I'm sure good governance will be the rule of the day. No doubt an eternal vigilance is the price one has to pay in democracy, and the eternal vigilance should be collective one. In conclusion, I state, if one reads the assurances given to the citizens of this country in the Constitution of India, it is clear that good governance, even if it does not come under Part 3 of the Constitution, it certainly is a basic right contemplated under the Constitution of India. At this stage, I want to quote Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, where mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tirelessness striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where clear stream of reason has not lost its way into dreary desert and desert sand of the sand of dead habit, where mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that freedom of heaven, Father, let my country awake. I hope the prayer of Gurudev becomes a reality with the efforts of people like you who are present here. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to add a little more to what I've put it in writing here. That is, I want to bring it to your notice how maladministration or no administration has affected the functioning of the three pillars of the Constitution. As you know, the Indian Constitution has created the three pillars, which call it the pillars, that is the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. From what I have read about it and what I have followed the thing, in all three pillars of the Constitution, primarily because of lack of responsibility, which leads to many things like corruption and other things, the functioning of the three pillars of the Constitution has become very, very questionable. Talking about the first pillar of the Constitution, the legislature, our elders, when they were discussing the framing of the Constitution, debated very, very seriously about the future of this country. And while discussing what type of a political system that this country should adopt, our elders spoke and said, we Indians were never ever independent. We were under the rules of Rajas, Maharajas, Zamindars, and so forth. And they made the laws they liked, and we had no say in the matter, and perforce we had to follow it, otherwise we were punished and all. It's in that background our elders, anticipating independence, said, now that we're going to become independent shortly, let's adopt a political system by which every Indian feels this governance is mine, it's by me and it's for me. And internationally, there were many political systems where there was the monarchy, there was dictatorship, there was ism-based politics like communism, socialism, capitalism. Amongst them was a system called democracy. The definition of the democracy then, in 1946, was government of the people, by the people, for the people. Maybe I'm a cynic, and today, according to me, that definition is government of some, by some, and for some and all. In that background, when you see a discussion of another issue that came up before that House, which was a predecessor to our Parliament and state legislatures, was after adopting democracy as the political system of this country, whether this country, when a person wanted to contest from a constituency, whether he should have an educational qualification or not. Many elders said, a person wants to represent my constituency, he should have the capacity to understand the problems of the constituency. He must have the capacity to find a solution to that problem and take the problem to the Parliament or the legislature and bring some solution to that. For that, they said, it requires some educational qualification. It is said, practically, majority of the people were expressing the view that there should be educational qualification for a man to contest in the election. But a little later, one gentleman stood up and supposed to have addressed the chair and said, sir, recently we adopted democracy as the political system of this country, and you said meaning of the word democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. Today, sir, somewhere in 1946-47, population of this country is 40 crores. Out of 40 crores, 80% of Indians are total illiterates. Sir, are you reserving democracy for the 20% of the literates? He asked a question. I believe the House was stunned. Nobody could oppose him. Then one elder stood up and started his address by saying, I am sorry. I did not look at this problem from the point of view with which Mr. Honorable Member is talking. He's right. Democracy cannot be reserved for any class of people. It's every Indian's right, and that resolution was dropped. Ladies and gentlemen, Constituent Assembly functioned from 46 to 1949 November. There was never a reported case of walkouts and shouts and nothing. What's happened to the successor institution like the Parliament and the legislature of the state? To give you an example, in 2016 winter session, the Lok Sabha was to meet for 14 days. Not one day, one item was discussed. It was Galata, a walkout. Houses were adjourned. 14 days. Times of India says 1 day's cost of Lok Sabha is 10 crores of rupees. There's a magazine called Election Watch which audited the performance of the members of the Lok Sabha for the season 2004 to 2009. Out of 543 members who spoke at least once and opened their mouth for speaking, not yawning, were only 174. We've been watching what's happening. We've been seeing in different state legislatures what's happening. We've been seeing the laws that are made, and sometimes we come to know of it only after 20 years. Take, for example, the recent publication of a news item from Uttar Pradesh. The income tax of the ministers and the MLAs were being paid by the state. And I believed, it must be the only state it happened and all. No, 3 days later it is mentioned 3 other states also was doing it for last so many years. Never came in the papers. You make the laws you like. You go on increasing your perks, your salaries, everything you increase. But what is that we're doing? If that is the first pillar of the Constitution, the second pillar of the Constitution, the executive. When the creation of executive was being discussed in the Constituent Assembly, our elders said, they are the future administrators of this country. Let us select the best of them. Let there be no interference. Let's have independent bodies to choose them. So we created the Public Service Commissions, the Central Public Service Commission, the State Public Service Commission. What has happened to these commissions? Does it have any more meaning than one meaning? Karnataka police have charge-sheeted one of the past Public Service Commission chairmen and members for taking bribe, how much money they have taken for giving a job. Now a man pays money and comes into the administrative service of the state. Is he going to be honest? He says, no, I have paid money. I say, I have not come free. And every scam that takes place in this country, there should be the signature of 1, 2 or 3 executives, because under the rules of practice, the MLAs can't sign. Every official order has to be signed by an executive. Let's take the institution which I also served. I do see here senior advocates sitting here and all who have served that institution. The judiciary. One case in one court takes 14 to 15 years. One appeal, second appeal, High Court, the Supreme Court. By the time the final judgment comes, are the litigants alive? It's jocularly said, husband and wife, husband is 25 years old, wife is 20 years old, they have a fight. One of them goes to court for restitution of conjugal rights. When the final judgment comes from the Supreme Court, husband will be 85 years old, the wife will be 80 years old. Are there ways and means of solving this problem? There are. But you don't want to sit in it because we have compartmentalized system. But that doesn't mean that these fallacies which I'm pointing out are there only in the 3 pillars of the Constitution, because I blame the society. Take the media. Media is not a creation of the Constitution. People loved it. People lifted it to the level of the 3 pillars of the Constitution and called it the 4th estate. And what's happening in the 4th estate? And some of you must have heard the Bombay lady, Neera Radia. Paid news concept. You take money and publish false news. For this, ladies and gentlemen, I blame the society in which we are. When I was young, I lived in a society where people who were accused of doing something wrong were boycotted by the society. And today we live in a society, people go to jail come out on bail, there are dozens of people waiting to garland them. And that is the society in which we are. That is my experience of 5 years in Karnataka Lokayukta. So I've been to more than 1,079 educational institutions asking the youth, because they alone can change the society, not people of my age, because we have brought that society to this level for personal gains. Change this society, build a society which respects honesty. No, it will take a long, long time for that change to take place. But unless you change this society, nothing will improve. Society is the conscience keeper. I have many, many things if I had the time to say, ladies and gentlemen, but my 5 years in Karnataka Lokayukta was so valuable that I've learned, seen the sufferings of the people. Let me give one example and end my thing. One day, a lady over 80, 85 years came to the institution. I asked them, what's the problem? She said, sir, I have no income, in local language. I have one son working in Mumbai. He sends me 250 rupees by money order. And postman wants 10% of that. You don't give 10%. He puts an endorsement, addressee found not available in 3 visits, the money goes back, God knows where it goes back. I contacted, because postman didn't come within the jurisdiction of the Karnataka Lokayukta, he was a central government employee, I contacted somebody concerned with it, that man thought 250, 10%, 25 rupees is not meant for officers of All India card or too small a figure. My officers are not available. You have a police force, you do it yourself. Look at this postman, he's been serving that locality for decades because they don't easily get transferred. He knows the condition of this person. Even from her, he wants his 10%. Look at this officer. Did he know what is 25 rupees to that lady? Arrogance of office. Where are we, ladies and gentlemen? What is that we are all doing about it? That's the question that's before you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening to me. I thank the Moneylife Foundation for giving me this opportunity of standing before you. I thank you all once again. Good day.